Speak of the devil, and it shall appear.
What the hell is going on?
Our plan is proceeding as expected.
Oh, really? Do I look like I'm running Wayne Enterprises right now? Your hit on the stock exchange, it didn't work, my friend. And now you have my construction crews going around the city at 24 hours a day. How exactly is that supposed to help my company absorb Wayne's?
Leave us.
No, you stay here. I'm in charge.
Do you feel in charge?
I've paid you a small fortune.
This gives you power over me?
A number of people have asked me if I've seen the House Judiciary Committee on the proposed assault weapons ban coming from the Democrats. That is a 12 hours long video. I was asked to watch one particular politician's point, and then I just let the video play. And I started listening to the debates, back and forth. And some people had some good arguments, I don't want to say on both sides, but I could tell that like a lot of people came with their either talking points that their staff gave them, or they came with their talking points because, they wanted to get their soundbite in, for their constituents. Even though another congressman or congresswoman countered or previously made a statement that contradicted what they went up there and said. And it's like multiple politicians went up there and they were doing the same thing. Like each side was trying to dispel the other side, but the whole, I'm on the floor and I'm reading what I wrote. And it's like, I don't particularly care for the format because it's not really a debate in real time. And then they try to like squeeze debates in there like, oh, will you concede your time? And it's kind of weird to me because I prefer, the back and forth to where you can challenge what a person is saying in real time rather than people getting up there and then giving their, pre-written speeches about stuff. And then it's just a whole bunch of like sound bites and talking points. And then people are trying to interject, and most people don't want to concede their time for questions or to be challenged. And, again, the cameras are on, so everybody's up there trying to cater to their base. I don't care for the format. But trying to be objective, and you all know I support the Second Amendment, and especially with the history that African Americans have in this country, I'm like, Dr. Claude Anderson, black people, should be able to ride around in tanks. Not that I literally, subscribe to the concept of riding around in tanks, but I'm just saying, like, if anybody should be supporting the Second Amendment, and if anybody should be unquestioned, about, their access to firearms, it should be black people. I know people are going to cite crime in the inner cities. Again, that's an economic issue. It's not a, we're just out here just, killing each other because, we're crazed and deranged. That's a white people problem. It's one of the things that irritate me about the conversation because mass shootings are not a black people problem. This whole concept where, somebody shows up and then kills as many random people that they don't know and don't have beef with, that's not what black people do. That's what majority white people do. But as we see there, you can throw an Asian here and there in there, or you can throw a Hispanic in there here and there. But like, nobody's concerned about going to a mall and a black person shows up and then just starts randomly cutting down people in the mall. I'm not saying that it never happens, but, pound for pound, we know where a lot of this is coming from, which are, young, disgruntled, white males that, really aren't even old enough to have experienced, anything. But I think that a lot of that comes from, these, be it the attack on masculinity or be it the attack on, this classic, positive white male identity that revolves around white men being, in the dominant position and young white men, not seeing their place in that. We talk about, the dating market and, 100% of women only want to date 10% of guys, the growth of incels, and, just guys that, if you're not a certain type of guy or, of a certain caliber or make a certain money, like, I mean, and then again, you have women that want every guy to be, rich. Yeah, it's not dating. I don't care what race you are, but I'm saying dating for young men today is way different than it was when I was coming up. What young men today have to compete with is, insane, and it's already been proven with charts and, that this is like a sexless, like what's going on right now, like this is like the most sexless generation, and sperm counts are going down. So, I can't say that, make it say that, that is the root of it all, but I am drawing a correlation between what's going on with the mass shootings and, the, just this, attack on maleness and masculinity. Uh, there was one more thing I was going to say about that. Oh, and the media, the way that the media constantly, puts these guys up on a pedestal and, gives them what they want, just the notoriety and, puts their picture up there and puts their name. I'm like, you keep doing that. And all it does is encourage copycat. I mean, I personally think there needs to be a law, against the media doing this type of stuff. Because, and I don't know whether even the leftist media does it intentionally so that they can, further try to push, their ideas of gun control. It's like they want another mass shooting to happen so that they can make an argument about gun control. But I'm like, why do you keep giving these, mass shooters what they want, which is attention and notoriety? Because every time, there's like, it's like you have these lulls. You ever notice that? Like, it's like there's these lulls with the mass shooting. Like, nobody's thinking about mass shooting. Hey, one hasn't happened in a while. And then one happens. And then in very short order, there's just like a whole bunch of quick, copycat killers out here. And it happens every time. Every time. So once you have like a big one, guarantee you within the next like month or two, there's going to be a bunch of copycats. And in my opinion, it's because, the media just loves to remind us, about, mass shootings and it starts putting the idea up in a lot of folks' head. But the crazy thing is, if the media didn't put it out there, then people would be coming up with all type of conspiracy theories about, just the mass shooting itself. But anyway, I'm getting, kind of way off topic. But the other thing I didn't particularly care for is I don't like the semantics in the debate of what I'm seeing up there. Like, example, on the Republican side, right? The conversation is about banning assault weapons, which I don't agree with, but that's what the conversation is about. So, and I know that liberals want to ban pretty much everything and make it so that nobody has access to everything. They don't want to stop at just assault weapons. They want to ban handguns. They want to ban concealed carry. So basically, as I always say, they want you to be just out there with nothing but your ass. Okay, that is just what they want. They'll deny it. They'll just like, oh, if we could just get rid of the assault weapons. But if you go and you look at blue states, you look at New York, right? The black people at the top supermarket could not protect themselves in New York based on New York laws. Even now, after the Supreme Court with the New York v. Bruen case, basically saying you have a right to conceal carry, and New York is just doing everything possible to frustrate the process. again, making things cost prohibitive, which is basically undercover racism, right? If you know black people disproportionately are poor and don't have resources and can't just throw $500 away at the application, the non-refundable application, then you've essentially barred, black people from being able to exercise their concealed carry, rights. Right. But the stupid thing are the people that would go through the process of getting their concealed carry permit wouldn't be the black people or any people for that matter that are out here committing gun violence and gun crime. Right. So just looking at blue states, you can see that in these blue states that it doesn't just stop at assault weapons and then we're good. No, they don't. They're hoplophobes. They hate firearms. They want to restrict the right into oblivion and then stand there and say, "Oh, we respect the Second Amendment." No, you don't. Again, look at New York. Look at California. Look at Hawaii. You know what I'm saying? Look at these places. These places come with these laws that basically the right is so restricted it's useless. This is a classic example of my friend's bitch of a mom who used to be like back in high school, you can borrow the car but there's no gas in it. She used to do that shit. She thought that shit was funny as hell. Making them scrub the toilet with a toothbrush. But you can borrow the car but there's no gas in it. Just to be evil. But anyway, I'm saying the one Republican senator, I think it's like McLaughlin or something, something. I don't know how to say his name. But anyway, he's up there and he's bringing up self-defense cases where most of the people were using handguns to defend themselves. Or maybe it was 50-50. I can't remember. But I'm saying talking about people defending themselves with handguns doesn't speak to the assault weapons ban issue. I'm saying just to be, intellectually, consistent with the argument, right? If you're going to use, people defending themselves with a firearm that's related to the assault weapons ban, then you use the quote unquote assault weapons to make that argument. You say this person defended themselves with an AR-15. This person defended themselves with an AK-47. That's what you say. There was another Republican politician who went up there and, because it's all this play on words, this weapons of war, this fully automatic weapons and people saying things like fully automatic weapons are banned. They're not banned. They're freaking prohibited, via, I forget what the damn thing is called, but basically, any machine guns, you stop being able to manufacture machine guns or have, viable ones after 1986. You can buy a machine gun. You got to go through, I think it's like a class 3 license or something like that. Anyway, but you can still get it. You just got to cough up about $30,000 to $50,000, but you can still get it. And the stupid thing is all these Americans, whether they're on the left or on the right, they keep making this argument like machine guns are banned. They're not banned. And the fact that they didn't ban them, completely, they just kind of put them behind a paywall, even reinforces the argument of shall not be infringed. It's like, why didn't they just flat out infringe it and ban it? But they didn't ban it. They just made it cost prohibitive, right? Because back in the day, back when they did it, it was like you had to pay a $200 tax stamp. Well, $200, that may be something ridiculous back in, the 1930s, but today, $200 isn't, it's not that bad. But again, because, the ones that were grandfathered in, there's only so many of those, the prices are sky high. So now you have a situation where basically when it comes to fully automatic machine guns, guess who are the only people who can afford to have them? The rich people. But the stupid thing is if you go back and if you had said to people, okay, we're going to create a law that only allows rich people to have machine guns, nobody would vote for that. Nobody would support that. But in essence, that's precisely what happened. Warren Buffett can buy a machine gun. Bill Gates can buy a machine gun. Elon Musk can buy a machine gun. It's nothing for them. They have the money to do it. They can drop $50,000 like it. Joe Rogan can buy a machine gun. But everybody else, y'all got $30,000 just sitting around, $50,000 just sitting around to buy a machine gun. You can do it. It's not illegal for you to do it. Yeah, you gotta, go through the the ATF and do the tax stamp and all that other stuff. But I mean, I see them pop up every once in a while. Like even when I go to like gun.deals, I'll see a machine gun up there every once in a while, $50,000 for a freaking M16 that's fully automatic, that has the auto sear in it. People keep saying these things are banned and they're not banned. It's like there's a damn paywall there that prevents your average person from accessing them. And some people may think that that's good enough, but I'm saying this idea that again, that you can't get them, that's not true. You can get them, you just need a lot of money to get them. So basically, everybody has co-signed a law that basically excludes the poors, right? Which are all the regular schmegular people. What else was kind of irritating about the committee, the Judiciary Committee? Oh, the one guy, again, another Republican, he is up there, he's bringing up, and the same guy, because I didn't finish my point, talking about weapons of war. And they want to play this semantic game about, what is weapons of war. And so he's like, well, what about M1 Grands? This bill doesn't include M1 Grand. Like, what do you want them to add it to the bill? You know what I'm saying? Because they could easily do that. And the reason why the Democrats don't do that is because you have a bunch of white fuds out there, veterans and, other people that, they're like, I don't believe a civilian should have an AR-15, but, these are historical relics. And that's why I hate that whole sporting clause. The Second Amendment isn't about sporting. The Second Amendment isn't about hunting. The Second Amendment is about, defense, self-defense from a tyrannical government. Technically speaking, it's not even really, about, concealed carry, as much as it is about a tyrannical government. I mean, to keep and bear arms, it's, it's kind of, right in there. Keep it and you can carry it. That's right in there. But what I'm saying is the core of the Second Amendment is about a tyrannical government. However, that's not even what I'm primarily concerned about. I'm primarily concerned about civil unrest, economic crisis, financial collapse, natural disasters like you saw in Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy. There's only 3 days worth of food in the supermarket. Any sort of disruption to the fragile system we have. I mean, even going into the whole, all the rioting and the looting that happened after George Floyd, was murdered, right? So I'm saying that's more realistic of situations that you would need, an AR-15. But anyway, the guy's up there. He points to the M1 carbine and the M1 Grand. It's like, come on, bro. You know that's not what they're talking about when they're talking about banning quote unquote assault weapons, right? But here's the dishonesty on the left. Because what they really want is they want to ban all semi-automatic rifles. Now, they can't say that openly because, they would lose support. Nobody would go for that, even though ultimately that's what they want to do. Ban all semi-automatic rifles. So again, they're going to make exemptions for, the guns that look like grandpa's hunting rifle. They're going to make exemptions for, the veterans' rifles and and what are considered relics. The M1 Grand, yeah, it shoots a bullet way bigger than a 5.56, way bigger than 223, which is typically what an AR-15 shoots, but it only has 8 rounds, and it does a little ping, when the damn clip comes out, an actual clip, not, because that's a clip versus a magazine. And, the gun guys, they like to go back and forth about magazines versus clips. The M1 Grand actually has a clip. That's the point that I'm making. But it's just a lot of like semantics and a lot of like, it's just not an honest conversation to where you can really get anywhere. The left wants to be, intellectually dishonest. The right wants to be intellectually dishonest. Nobody really wants to say, what they want. I mean, I think that the Republicans maybe have been a little bit more honest, because I'm like, y'all just want to ban to the left. I'm like, y'all just want to ban all semi-automatic rifles. And you just own that and then have a discussion about that. But there was one politician in particular. I don't know where she's from, but I think her name is Jayapal or something like that. Jaypal, I think is how you spell it. Don't quote me on that. But she made the most compelling, gun grabber, gun control point that I've heard. And it brings up a very interesting question. Right? And I had to take pause and I had to think about it. Doesn't mean I agree with it. I'm just saying, out of all the bullshit that I heard, it was the most compelling argument that I've heard yet. And she said, and I'm just paraphrasing, she was like, your right to self-defense doesn't trump my right to life. Your right to self-defense doesn't trump my right to life. And I had to think about that one. Now, later on, there was a bunch of what I felt was kind of conflating. Like, in other words, my right to life is a much more powerful statement than, my right to feel safe. Because, I mean, to feel, that's so arbitrary, it's insane. You know what I'm saying? Like that, like a racist white person can be like, being around black people doesn't make me feel safe. I have a right to feel safe. So remove black people from this space, right? You see what I'm saying? Like my right to feel, safe. And I'm saying anybody could say that. Well, having a gun on my hip makes me feel safe. So how is your feel more important than my feel, right? But so like I'm like dismiss the feel. But let's go with my right to life, right? And I'm saying that essentially we're saying the same thing, but then I realized that there's a distinction between what she was saying and how somebody like I think, how somebody like myself thinks. So somebody who's saying, your right to self-defense doesn't trump my right to life, right? And it's in other words, it's just a different approach. And this does kind of lean towards how women tend to process information, but obviously there's some men that process it the same way. But it tends to be, a woman thing, because when it comes to men, what I notice about this whole gun discussion, and even just when it comes to society and patriarchy and everything, men are the poison and the antidote. What do I mean by men are the poison and the antidote? Men are the poison and the antidote, meaning, yes, the majority of the violence, the gun violence, is coming from men. The overwhelming majority, that's undeniable, that's without question, right? But then at the same time, men are asked to do the defending and the protecting, right? It's like the liberal left, they look at it like, well, we only want police to have guns, or we only want the government to have guns, right? Which to me is just way too trusting when you look at the totality of history and, what happens when a government has a monopoly on violence. And to me, a lot of the people on the left lack imagination of like the horrors, even though, you can open up a history book, you can watch documentaries on YouTube and see the horrors of governments having a monopoly on violence. And it kind of reminds me of, it parallels, even though people don't like the term, critical race theory, it's critical race theory being the actual racist history of America and the racial violence that took place in America versus the when governments have monopolies on violence against their people. We could look at like Azerbaijan in the 90s. You could look at obviously the Holocaust. You could look at the Khmer Rouge. You could look at the Ottoman Empire, against the Armenians. You could look at the Nanking Massacre. You could look at the Latimer Massacre, the Ludlow Massacre, which were basically, the U.S. government against, workers' strikes when it came to coal mining and stuff like that. Because, workers in this country originally, even poor whites, didn't have a whole bunch of rights. They weren't allowed to form unions. They weren't allowed to strike. The Homestead Massacre. I mean, there's a lot of these things that took place, at the late 19th century and early 20th century. A lot of these things took place. But I was going somewhere, with this. That question, because this is how I look at it. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. Essentially, we're saying the same thing. I want to be able to protect myself, and I'm willing to fight. So I want to have the necessary tools to protect myself. Someone who says, well, I have a right to life, right? Which means basically what they're saying is, I don't like guns. Guns are in society. We need to ban all the guns and then everybody will be safe. I think that's a very childish way of looking at the world. And it's like, I remember one time I had to prove this to a woman. And she was so angry. She was so frustrated. But I'm like, this is the way that it is. You know what I'm saying? As big as I was literally twice. I was twice her height and twice her weight. Okay, literally twice her weight. And I was making a point about the like. It doesn't matter whether men have guns or not. Men would still overpower women. And she got so, incensed by me saying that, like offended, like, oh my, I said the most sexist thing in the world. And I was like, okay. And I'm like, come here. I was like, okay, I'm going to grab your arm and I want you to try to get away from me. And she tried her hardest. And, at first, she just tried to pull away. And then she realized she couldn't pull away. And then she started really trying to fight me and pull away. And she couldn't do it. And the more aggressive she got with trying to pull herself away, the more aggressive I got with pulling herself to me, to the point that I damn near had her in a bear hug and lifted her feet off of the ground. And I mean, her eyes were so bloodshot and red. And you could see like the tears welling up in her eyes because that's how I think in terms of why I want to have an AR-15 or the best tools that I can have. I understand why her eyes were watering and why, her face was like just so flushed with red and anger, because she felt powerless. And it's just like, it's not fair, like that you can just do this to me. And all I'm doing is I'm just holding her, and she's trying to fight, and I'm holding her until I'm like, I got bigger arms than you, I got bigger muscles than you, I weigh more than you. You are not going to overpower me. It's like that when that little midget was on, what was that? Cops. The one that was like, I can break these cuffs. You can't break those cuffs. You know what I mean? And she was on some, I can break these cuffs. I can break through your grip. I'm like, you can't break through my grip. And this is like what so many women don't want to like accept. They look at things and they're like, oh, if he didn't have a gun, I'm like, what, you would be safer? That's what you think? Yeah, you might be able to stop, mass shootings as the way that this is, but all that would happen is, okay, you ban the AR-15s. And then there would be a mass shooting with pistols. And then they tell us how we got to get rid of all the pistols. You see? And then you would still have the other situations like what you saw in Nice, France, where I think it was 384 people were injured and, like 108 people were killed or something like that when they were ran over. But again, let's just focus on, mass shootings. And, the idea is, yeah, if you got rid of all the guns, right, there probably wouldn't be any mass shootings. But what the hell would you open yourself up to? And see, this is where the whole aspect of, men being the poison and the antidote. I have a folder on my computer that has nothing but atrocities. Nanking Massacre. Go just Google it. Google Nanking Massacre. Google Baba Yar, in Poland. I think it's called Baba Yar. Google, Auschwitz, Dachau. You know what I'm saying? Google, where these massive, purgings took place. I mean, and even for African Americans, slavery, Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan running around terrorizing black people. I don't understand why how any black person can think in terms of, not embracing the Second Amendment, because I'm like, what a lot of privileged white people can sit around thinking can't happen already happened to us. So when it comes to black people, I got a whole different energy for black people, especially older black people who claim that they went through it. They went through the racism. They went through the bigotry and all that stuff. And then they're on their way out the door. They only got 10 to 15 years left in their life, and they would leave their children defenseless to a group of people who have already demonstrated their savagery against black people. Like, to me, that is unforgivable behavior when it comes from Sheila Jackson and Maxine Waters and, any of these other black politicians. Who was the other one that died? Elijah Cummings and shit like that. It's unforgivable. And you all went through it, and they just, oh no, we don't need the Second Amendment. That's why, y'all can jump up and y'all can say whatever you want about Clarence Thomas. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, again, you can read the opinion of New York, v. Bruin, and right in there, he talked about all the stuff that black people went through in Jim Crow and how many of these laws were created to, facilitate the disarmament of specifically black people. And, you get, all damn near every black politician on there. There was one brother from, I forget what state, but he wasn't with it. Because, I'm not keeping up on all my politicians. But what I notice is that there's just getting back to the, your right to self-defense doesn't trump my right to life. To me, it's just the key difference between fighters and non-fighters. People who see themselves as being capable versus people who don't. If you're not capable, if you don't want to get in a fight, your idea, your thought process is going to be just get rid of the guns. Just get rid of them. Now I don't have to engage in a fight. You know what I mean? The risk of having to worry about having to defend myself goes significantly down. And I'm kind of like, that's really short-sighted. You can see that by what goes on in the UK. And it's like, okay, you may end quote unquote mass shootings, but then you open yourselves up to all other forms of everyday crime. The rate of home invasions in the UK is much higher than it is in the US. You know why? Because most people, unless they're like looking for drugs and stuff, most people are not trying to run up in anybody's house like that, or unless they're looking specifically for guns where the homeowner is not there and to sell it to their, or give it to their friends. But it's a very risky situation, especially in, shall issue states or constitutional carry states. You know what I mean? Georgia is not a state that you want to run up in somebody's house looking for shit. Texas is not a state where you want to do that. Florida is not a state where you want to do that. But the states like New York, yeah, very few people in this state of New York own firearms. So if you run up in their house and you attack them, you're not going to be met with firepower as a rule. I mean, this was the whole basis of the Pettit murders in Connecticut, where the guys came in and they raped the wife and the two daughters and they tied the husband up in the basement. And then, he was sitting up on there, Oprah, crying. I bet you if he could go back in time and quantum leap himself, he would have wished that he would have had a firearm to protect his family because his wife is dead and both of his daughters are dead. And they were raped and the house was burnt down, I believe. I'm pretty sure they burnt the house down and he escaped out through the basement window. You can go on YouTube and pull up the video. Type in the Pettit murders or Pettit massacre and Oprah Winfrey. Oprah interviewed the husband. You know what I mean? And so he has to still live on, with that quote unquote failure that he is a man, didn't protect his family. Again, like I said, men are the poison and the antidote. When women are sitting there, only police should have firearms. Who do you think they're thinking about when they think that only police should have a firearm? A bunch of women in uniform? No, they're thinking about a bunch of men in uniform. But see, the thing is this whole aspect of, not trusting the individual, but trusting the government because, police officers are sworn police officers and they take an oath and they, there's a hierarchy and there's a chain of command, right? But not with your average citizen. But, my question is, well, who's watching the watchers? If the police are the watchers, who's watching the watchers? What happens if they go rogue? But I guess again, in the minds of the anti-gunners, they preposterous. It'll never happen, right? That's their whole attitude. That it would never happen, even though history demonstrates, otherwise. But the way that I'm looking at it, it's like, you have fighters and you have non-fighters. Me, I want a fighting chance. You know what I'm saying? Like if I have it's like, how I want to say it. I'll use some movie references. It's like what I say about Quill and the Mandalorian and the Mandalorian saying, right? I have spoken. It is the way. So when somebody comes up and let's say somebody's trying to carjack me and they put the gun in my face, I have spoken. It is the way. Get out the car. Right? And they have a gun. If I don't have a gun, I have no choice but to freaking comply. And they may still kill me and take me out. But if I do have a gun and I do have firepower, whether I'm in my car or whether I'm in my home and I have a rifle, see, then I start acting like Bane. And they have their gun, but I have my gun. And my attitude is, and just like Bane told the guy that was like, I gave you a small fortune. And you think this gives you power over me? How? That's my attitude. And the same attitude is towards the government. When if they just, go all willy-nilly and think they want to do whatever, it's like, and you think this gives you power over me? How? But again, government, not my main concern. Other people are my main concern, which mirrors what the, anti-gun people, who don't trust me with a gun are saying. I'm like, I don't trust other people, period, whether they have guns or not, because I understand mob mentality. I understand, the savagery that people will engage in. Let the power go out and let there be a couple days without food. That is more realistic than, a tyrannical government and, martial law being enacted and all that stuff. That is more realistic. The scenario of serious civil unrest. And I don't want to be out there with nothing but my ass. I know that when crime goes down, I might have a great job and I'm living comfortably. But I know there's a lot of people out here because America and especially the Democrats don't want to address wealth inequality. I know there's a lot of people out here that are struggling. And it's almost like, I forget who said it. It was either Da Baby or Little Baby. But one of them made the point, the rappers, one of them made the point that part of the reason you see all this jacking out here and, robbing and stealing and everything else is because a lot of these young guys, they don't have a hustle. Before guys used to have a hustle. I'm not worried about drug dealers. Drug dealers are too busy making money selling drugs. Again, they're not jack boys, they're drug dealers. You know what I'm saying? You leave them alone, they leave you alone. But it's the jack boys that you got to worry about here, and the jack boys are directly tied to whether there's any economic opportunities out here. You know what I mean? So you got to protect yourself, from them. So I'm aware that, when it comes to, human behavior, once you know, things break down enough, you're going to see savagery in people that you thought didn't exist. And no amount of your Abrahamic religions are going to be able to protect you from the reality of the savagery, that many people will, engage in. I mean, that's just the fact. Shit'll be out here looking like The Road or looking like The Purge. That's what that shit is going to be looking like. And so to answer the question, or answer the statement of, your right to self-defense doesn't trump my right to liberty. Hey, I'm just gonna say it like it needs to be said. I'm like, yes, it does. Yes, it does. Because essentially what you're telling me is that I need to do like you and just accept, being a victim by having this belief of the unlikeliness that something would happen. I don't operate like that. I'm not a ride around without my seatbelt type of person. You know what I mean? I'm not or let me take off my seatbelt because we have airbags. Like, I'm not that type of person. I want the seatbelt and the airbag. I want the condom and the birth control. You see what I'm saying? But you get these other people, they it's like what they're demanding is that there's this utopia somehow being created. And I'm like, it would be one thing if you were actually trying to create a utopia, but they're not trying to create a utopia. Like, in other words, again, I know that human behavior will turn savage if people don't have what they need. And so my thing is if you wanted to really have a crimeless society, well, you're going to have to address the wealth inequality and all that other stuff. Because, again, I'm not worried about a mass shooting, which is rare, which is a drop in the bucket when you look at the grand total of homicides. Again, when they tell you that 43,000 gun deaths, 67% of those gun deaths are suicides. We're not talking about assault weapons because of suicides. We're talking about assault weapons because of mass shootings. Okay? And no, we're not talking about, assault weapons because of, the other, 8 to 11,000 deaths, which 85% of which are black on black crime in the inner city. When we're talking about assault weapons, we're not even talking about resolving that because the majority of that is handguns. You see? But I'm not going to give up my assault weapons or my, as I like to call them, defense rifles. I'm not going to give up my assault weapons, nor am I going to give up my handguns in a world where I know that, other things are not being addressed. That's just me personally. And when it comes down to it, I get into back and forth with this about, with Cap about, what people would really be willing to do. Cap is on some have what you need type of mentality. That's his attitude. And the left is like, we'll ban it. And I'm like, yeah, that's if I turn it in, right? And that's why they want to have a list. That's why they want, people to register their guns and everything so that they can have a list and they can use that list like they did in Australia and all these other states. And, then they don't have to go door to door and do that. They'll just say, if I know that you have this gun with this serial number, and if we don't receive that gun to check it off the list, then you will be deemed a felon by such and such a date. That's how it's going to go down. That's why, all that stuff with universal background checks. Universal background checks are code for we want a damn registry. That's what it is. Because all those guns that were sold during private sales that have no real bill of sale and aren't tied to the original purchaser, right? Those guns are just out there floating around. And so the only way that you would be able to capture those guns is you would have to have universal background checks where a gun as it's transferred is attached to somebody. As opposed to being some gun that somebody bought in Georgia at a flea market or at, well, actually you would have to go through a background check at a flea market, but at a gun show where people show up. I've seen them at the gun shows. They'll show up with an AK-47 strapped to their back with a stick in it that says for sale. I remember, I'll never forget that. It was an Asian guy. Asian guy was selling his AK and he was walking around with the AK with the stick in it that said for sale. It was a private sale. He was at a gun show. So, and again, it's not that I'm against, certain regulations, but they got to make sense and they got to be effective. Plain and simple. And then what I notice is, when we talk about sensible gun laws, and I've said this before, when we talk about sensible gun laws, why is there never any discussion about sensible gun rights? What I mean by sensible gun rights, like example, in Georgia, if I have a concealed carry permit and I go into the gun store, I don't have to go through a background check. I've already been vetted. So since I've already been vetted, it should just be easier for me to just walk in there and walk out with whatever I want because I've already been vetted. But see, liberals in the blue states that they want to make everything as onerous as possible, have all sorts of redundancies. I forget what state this was. I think California just got rid of their 10-day waiting period. That got smacked down in the courts, because of the New York v. Bruin case. And I want you to think about what was that 10-day waiting period really protecting, right? Crimes of passion. Okay, well, what were your statistics on how many crimes were crimes of passion? How many people went in, bought a gun, and then went and committed a crime with it? Not to mention it completely ignored whether somebody already had a firearm. You know what I mean? Like I used to think that, with the guns that I had, where, I'm in Jersey and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, but like, why do I have to do this whole process again? Right? Because we have to check you again. But I already have guns in my possession. If I was going to commit a crime, why not just commit it with the guns I already have? Why am I going through all this bullshit? You know what I'm saying? We got to make sure. I'm like, oh my God, really? You know what I mean? Like, they would have you do bullshit like that. And I'm just like, well, if I was going to commit a crime, why not just commit it with the guns I already have? Like, what are you preventing by making me go through all this red tape and all this bullshit? Like, what are you preventing? Who are you keeping safe? You know what I mean? Like, it just got to a point where, like, it just didn't make sense. All it was just costing me more and more money, more and more money. And I'm like, these are the sort of redundancies that take place. And so, if it was all about everything being sensible, then you would have as much as you have sensible gun control, you would have sensible gun rights. You would have greater freedoms for those people who have already been vetted. But that's not what you have. No, it's just about, again, creating this sort of poll tax to exercise a right. And punishing those who exercise the right with, these sort of technicality laws, these sort of like, where you're just harassing people who own firearms and making them pay crazy fees and redundant fees, because you really want to discourage firearm ownership, regardless of how legal it is. I'm like, why don't you go focus on the criminals that are actually committing crimes with illegal guns? Why are you focused on me or us? Why are you folks? Because they just, how dare you exercise your rights? No, we want to make it as onerous and taxing as possible to where you get so discouraged, from all the hoops that you have to jump through that you don't even exercise your right. If we were talking about voting, like black people especially would be going ballistic. This is a poll tax. They would be going ballistic. But somehow when it comes to the Second Amendment, which is another right that, white folks try to deny black folks, black people don't make a peep. They don't make a peep. And yes, like I said, I understand we got gang-related inner city violence, but that is economic. If we could create economic opportunities and give these young black men, jobs that started out at, $50,000 to $60,000, a lot of the bullshit that you see out here in these streets would stop. We'd have more fathers in the home. We'd have more gainfully employed men. We'd have more fathers giving guidance to their son, having shit to offer their sons, being in a position where their sons, look at their father as somebody who being worthy to listen to. Right. But we've had decades of unemployment and underemployment and, therefore busted homes and welfare states and, fucked up child custody, situations. And you got young men that, they have no real hope or future. And as Amos Wilson once said, if you have young men in a community and they're jobless or underemployed, and you give them manhood training, in the vacuum of actual economic opportunities, they will cannibalize the community, which is essentially what you see in the black community. Not only will they cannibalize the community, they will spill out of the black community and spill into the white community. And they will cause problems there. But very rarely do you get white people that make that sort of connection. They just like, oh, the niggers that came over here and see, that's why. And the issue is bail reform and da-da-da-da. And that's what it is. And these damn DAs releasing them. No, again, when it comes to the bail reform, no, there is legitimate need for bail reform because the way that bails are structured, it disproportionately affects minorities. Now, do I think that somebody who shot somebody, at 11 o'clock at night on Monday should be let out Tuesday morning? No. But other people that are getting arrested for nonviolent offenses, should not be sitting in jail until trial, because they can't afford to post bail. That should not be that way. But again, when you go over to the right, you can't have an honest conversation about that. They just think, every black person, no matter what they been charged with, you should just throw them in jail and throw away the key. So it's like you can't have an honest conversation, a real honest conversation about anything where people are like, okay, I see where you're coming from. That's reasonable. And then that's why people wonder why, this country is so polarized right now. Because you can't call people out on being intellectually dishonest. People are intentionally straw manning the other side's arguments. And so I'm like, that's exactly why this shit just goes round and round and round, and it just creates further division and, further frustration. And like I said, I mean, right now, I mean, I can't really say, whether I'm right or left. I want to say I'm more right of center, as of right now, because I know about the bigotry and the bullshit. I argue with these people all the time when I, leave comments and shit like that, or I'll watch a video or I'll go to change. You see what I post in my community tab. I'm pretty well-rounded when it comes, not even well-versed, but well-rounded when it comes to the channels that I watch. And I'm saying, hell, the fact that I watch so many gun channels, that'll bring me over to the, the voices on the right. And right now, a lot of them are making a little bit more sense, even though I know that there's some bigotry baked in there once we get to the racial issue. But there's certain things that are being pointed out that I'm like, yeah, I'm in more alignment with what they're saying than what the left is saying, where the left is basically on some, everybody should be gay and it's all about feelings over facts and giving black people lip service when it comes to reparations and tangibles and, things like that. Like, it's like, what have they done? What, again, Eddie Murphy, what have you done for me lately? Eddie, what have you done for me lately? I want what's coming to me. Like that's how I feel. I'm on some oofufu shit when it comes to the Democratic Party. Eddie, I want what's coming to me. I'm American woman now. You know what I mean? That's how I feel. But yeah, I'm at an hour. I don't like to go over an hour. Uh, but yeah, I mean, this is where my mind is right now. Just listening to the discussion again. That woman politician. She had the best. The best question, so to speak, or the best. I know it was a statement, but I'm just saying, yeah, does my right to self-defense trump your right to life, right? But it's there's so much baked into that. It's kind of like, okay, your right to life means that I should be defenseless. Like, let's reverse it. So your right to life means I should be defenseless because this tool can be used offensively or defensively. And you're worried about it being used offensively or falling into the hands of the wrong person, right? That's what you're worried about. It's kind of like, to me, it's still kind of, it's like the silly UK knife laws. I'm like, it's a knife, it's a tool. I mean, anything can become a sharp object to kill somebody with. If you ever did an autopsy on a person, you would realize how fragile the human body is. Like, everything is in the torso. It's in the torso and the neck, and then obviously the head has the brain. But I'm like, everything is in the torso. The limbs are just kind of, they're just for moving around. But like, it's like, heart, lungs, and then pretty much everything else has to do with digestion. That's the funny part. Like, if you really like, obviously you have the kidneys and shit like that, but I'm just saying, most of your torso is GI tract. The heart and the lungs just, they oxygenate. But I'm saying, if you ever did an autopsy, you would see how fragile the human body is. You would see that, like, we're literally like sacks of meat with not much to us, especially after you remove, the all of the organs from the the abdomen and the torso. It's like there's nothing there. It's just a cavity. It's literally just a cavity. You just take all the organs out. It's just like, it's like a box with stuff in it. But all that shit is important to you staying alive. So yeah, humans are definitely capable of killing each other. The biggest threat to other people are people. And it's because of that I want to have the necessary tools to defend myself. I'm not trying to make it an even playing field. If somebody comes at me with a knife, I want a pistol. If somebody comes at me with a pistol, I want an AR-15. I'm not trying to make it fair. I want overwhelming force. And especially in a situation where you might be outnumbered. Again, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to be a woman and be attracted to the very group of men that might pose a threat to you. I don't know what that feels like. I don't look at a woman, or am I attracted to a woman and go, oh, she's dangerous, she could harm me. Like, I don't look at women like that, but I know women do. Women look at men like that. And like I said, men are the poison and the antidote. We're the face of all the violence and crime, but then at the same time, we're the only ones that can, resolve the crime, right? Resolve the violence, right? Men checking other men. Women can't check men, not through violence. And I understand that that's a very, that could be a very scary place for a woman to be, tends to be why women from an evolutionary standpoint stick with other women, and they don't have to make sense or be logical or anything else like that. They're looking out for each other. Because be it the fact that, in patriarchy, men controlled and wielded the power and wielded the resources and everything. If a woman got ostracized, that was a death sentence because she couldn't survive in the wilderness by herself. I mean, a man can barely do it, but she couldn't survive in the wilderness by herself. So, women, girl rights, not girl rights, girl rights, Karen, I think it's Strahan, she spoke about that, about women's hypo-agency and why women, tend to, operate in an insulated fashion because they begin an evolutionary standpoint of women, protecting themselves as a group, right? But I do grow tired as a man of being constantly accused of, we are the problem and we are the cure. And there's complicated aspects of kind of what you see right now, where it's like, you have nations that need soldiers, they need men to take on the responsibility to fight enemies, both foreign and domestic, but yet masculinity gets attacked so much that they can't even get new recruits for those men to operate in that fashion, in that capacity as enforcers, of the rules and the regulations of the society. And then you have this rise in rogue males, and it's like, once you get past a critical mass, then what do you do? I can't think like a woman, from a male perspective, because at the end of the day, I know that, while women may look at me and say, he's the poison, I'm also the cure. I was looking at that Jubilee video where they had the transgender men up there and they were talking about their male privilege. And, I don't like Brandon Tatum. I can't stand his ass, but I'm saying, he responded appropriately by telling them, he's like, yeah, but we're also the first ones that are expected to respond when shit goes down. We're expected to respond. So yeah, while somebody might put their mask on versus being told by a woman because they think that you're a man, because with men, the threat of violence is always on the table. But by the same token, if somebody were to walk in here and engage in a violent act, all the women in that room are going to look to you to do something because they assume for you to be more capable. And this is the whole problem with transgender men and what they don't understand about manhood and the hierarchies of manhood amongst men and the ranking systems amongst men. They don't understand that. And yes, those hierarchies do revolve around, right violence and who is the most capable. It's not that a man can't have other skills, but he definitely has to be useful to the group. He definitely has to, if he's not the biggest one in the group, he needs to have some sort of knowledge base or some sort of skill base in order to, have a ranking. But, the transgender men, they don't really see that. And so they kind of come with female mentality, even though they phenotypically look like a man. And so I'm very conscious of that when I hear women talk about, what they want to shut down, because that's typically what women do. Shut it down. Let there be 3 kids playing, and there's a toy box, and one of the kids spills one of the toys all over the floor, and she didn't see it, and she doesn't know who it is. It'll be next thing you know, then nobody can play with toys. The other 2 kids are crying because they wanted to play with the toys, but now they can't. That's how women treat shit, and the gun control shit is the same way. That's it. Nobody can have guns. That's how women deal with the shit. Because, like I said, women only see themselves at the end of a barrel. And then once you throw children in there, oh, please forget about it. Forget about it. People are just going to be overly emotional because children are innocent. Children can't exercise the Second Amendment. Children can't shoot back. At least a grown woman, if she really wanted to, she could learn how to use a weapon and engage in self-defense. If she really wanted to, she could. But a child, nah. And when you have these poisonous men coming in there doing damage, it's like, okay, if the men that are supposed to be the antidote can't shut this down, then, well, we want all these guns banned. That's what it's going to turn into. And, as Captain Solo likes to point out a lot of times when we have these conversations, the gun rights group, when it comes to these mass shootings, the gun rights group, y'all need to come up with something. And I'm a part of that group too. Once you get into children being killed, you got to come up with something. Something that you believe is going to be however, y'all want to do it. Got to come up with something. And the smart thing would be to do, if you really want to talk about a bipartisan, a way of doing it. And I don't even think that last bill that they passed, it was a goofy bill, when you want to talk about bipartisan, gun control. But I think the issue is again, there needs to be some sort of reciprocity. If we give this, then you need to give us this. Okay, if we give you, whatever it is, let's just say guns being registered, then we need national reciprocity. If you know who has guns and all that other stuff, which again the ATF and the FBI already know, but I'm saying, yeah, if we give you this, then we want national reciprocity. I should be able to carry in Georgia, and I should be able to carry in New York City. It's just that simple. You already got all our stuff, so what's the problem? But see, then you get into that whole hoplophobe thing. Well, they don't want guns. We just want to create a law that restricts more gun rights. And that's why the pro Second Amendment people, that's why they push back, because they never get anything out of it. But and I'm saying if it was really all about actually enacting something that would be effective at stopping mass shootings, then the left would be asking the gun rights people to come up with something. They would include them in the conversation, but they don't do that because it's really about disarming the American people and controlling people, in my opinion. That's what it's really about. And especially with this coming instability, this economic decline that we're looking at in the very near future. You see, the revolution that is coming. They want to disarm the American people. And don't get it twisted. I do look at the Republican and Democratic Party as the right and left arm, of the same beast. But for right now, I'm just saying, if it's all really about, doing something that's actually effective, then including the actual, not just, Republican politicians, but actual pro-gun people, and asking them to come up with something. But that's never done. It's never done. Ask the Military Arms Channel to come up with something. Ask Coleon Noir to come up with something. Ask freaking any of these guys, Mr. Guns and Gadgets. Ask Mr. Clean, Mr. Guns and Gear. Ask Talon Sai. The list goes on and on. Reno May. Ask them. What they could effectively do. What could we pass? In terms of gun control that would actually stop these things from happening. Or other things that could be done. And then by the same token, what redundancies exist in the gun control system that don't need to exist, that don't need to be there. California shouldn't have a handgun roster. The handgun roster is only there to limit the choices of handguns that a person could buy. That's what it's there, to do. And so again, these are not honest measures of gun control. They're just there to frustrate, gun owners and just, death by 1,000 paper cuts type of thing. It's not an honest conversation, and it's part of the problem. But I think I've spoken enough on, the issue and, this topic. So I'm going to end this video off. You guys can write what you want in the comment section. I had enough people that were asking me about that, the Democrat Judiciary Committee. I think it's the Democrat Judiciary. I think that's what they call it, but I know it's the Judiciary Committee. But they were asking me about it. I'm not watching 12 hours of videos. I watched, like I said, 6 or 7, politicians, and I was just sitting there. I was saying to myself, I was like, okay, the exchanges are interesting. People are bringing up interesting points. People are bringing up points I've heard before, but what was I going to say about the points that I've heard before? But there's not enough honesty in the discussion for it to really go anywhere. It's the same stuff over and over again. I'm glad they're having the discussion, but they're not listening to each other. They're not responding to each one's talking points in real time, and even any acknowledgement. It's like they're so busy trying to be right that they're not trying to get it right. It's not like it's like, okay, yeah, that's true. Like the folks on the right, they just want to ban semi-automatic rifles, and what they should be saying is, we don't care about what's going on with other form of violence, even though that's the vast majority of violence is this sort of carjackings and shootings and home invasions and everything. Like, what we're focused on here today is how do we stop mass shootings? That should be their argument and their focus. But the things get jumbled up a lot of times in how they present their argument. I'm like, you just want to ban all semi-automatic rifles. Why don't you own that, and then we can start to have the conversation from there? Not that I agree with it, but I'm like, you need to own what you're actually trying to do. But instead, we want to ban 95% of semi-automatic rifles because you plan on coming back to it later. But we respect the Second Amendment. No, stop it. No, you don't. So there's always this semantics. There's always this smoke screen, ninja vanish thing going. I'm like, and truth be told, that's really what's wrong with this country when it comes to why it's so divided. Because people are not having true intellectual conversations. It's not truly intellectual. It's not, okay, I see where you're coming from, but let me interject and throw this at you. Like, no, it's not that. It's I'm not done talking. When I'm done, giving my, pre-written speech, then you can respond with your pre-written speech. It's like, that's not active listening. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just y'all talking at each other. It's just stupid. But anyway, I'm going to end this video. That's all I got to say. That's my video. SWP out.